Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most iconic tanks in military history, the M4 Sherman. Known as the backbone of Allied armored forces during World War II, the Sherman wasn't just a tank, it was a symbol of American industrial power, adaptability, and determination on the battlefield. From the sands of North Africa to the hedgerows of Normandy, from the mountains of Italy to the islands of the Pacific, the Sherman rolled across every major front of the war, carrying with it both strengths and weaknesses that shaped its legendary reputation. The story of the Sherman begins in 1940 and 1941, as the United States realized that modern warfare required a new generation of medium tanks. The early American tanks, like the M2 and M3 Lee, were serviceable but outdated compared to the German Panzer III and Panzer IV. Designers quickly moved to create a tank that combined reliability, mobility, and enough firepower to meet the challenges of the time. The result was the M4 Sherman, officially standardized in 1941 and entering production the following year. What set the Sherman apart wasn't necessarily that it was the most powerful tank of the war. In fact, by raw statistics, German tanks like the Panther or Tiger outclassed it in armor thickness and gun penetration. But the Sherman had something the Germans could not match. It could be produced quickly, maintained easily, and adapted to countless roles. By the end of the war, more than 49,000 Shermans had been built, making it one of the most mass-produced tanks in history. Visually, the Sherman had a high silhouette with sloped armor, a distinctive rounded turret, and a short-barreled 75mm gun in its early models. Later variants upgraded to a longer 76mm gun, giving it more punch against German armor. The tank weighed around 30 tons, which was lighter than many of its European counterparts, but this weight allowed it to be transported easily across oceans and rivers, a critical factor in a global conflict. Its gasoline-powered engine, whether the early radial aircraft engines or later Ford V8 and diesel variants, provided enough speed to keep up with mechanized infantry and conduct fast maneuvers. One of the Sherman's greatest advantages was reliability. Crews knew that when they turned the key, the tank would start. In the harsh conditions of war, mud, snow, desert sand, this dependability was invaluable. German Panthers and Tigers, while fearsome, often broke down due to mechanical complexity. The Sherman, on the other hand, was designed with simplicity in mind, meaning spare parts could be swapped quickly, and a broken tank could be back in action in hours instead of days. But reliability came with a price. The early Sherman's armor was thin by mid-war standards, and its 75mm gun often struggled to penetrate the thick frontal plates of German Tigers and Panthers. Crews soon gave the Sherman a grim nickname, Ronson, after the lighter, with the phrase, "lights up the first time." This reputation for catching fire came from its gasoline fuel and ammunition storage, although later models improved safety by adding wet stowage systems that reduced the risk of explosions. Despite these shortcomings, Shermans were rarely alone. American and Allied doctrine emphasized combined arms tactics and numerical superiority. A single Sherman might struggle against a Tiger in a one-on-one duel, but Shermans usually fought in groups, supported by artillery, infantry, and air power. This coordination allowed them to overwhelm the enemy, rather than relying on individual tank superiority. In fact, it's often said that the Allies didn't need one Sherman to equal one Tiger, they could bring 5 Shermans to the fight. The Sherman's versatility also deserves recognition. It wasn't just a tank, it was a platform. Engineers converted it into flamethrower tanks for clearing bunkers, amphibious, DD Shermans, that swam ashore during the D-Day landings, mine-clearing Shermans with flails, self-propelled artillery, and tank destroyers with upgraded guns. This adaptability ensured that no matter the mission, there was a Sherman variant ready to perform. In combat, the Sherman played a pivotal role in countless battles. In North Africa, it proved itself against German and Italian armor, giving the Allies a much-needed tool to challenge Rommel's Afrika Korps. In Europe, Sherman spearheaded the advance after D-Day, rolling through the bocage and pushing across France. In the Pacific, Shermans provided vital fire support against Japanese fortifications, where enemy tanks were less common but bunkers and caves required powerful, mobile guns. Sherman crews often developed strong bonds with their machines, giving them nicknames and personalizing them with paint and markings. For many soldiers, the Sherman was both home and lifeline. The interior was cramped and noisy, but crews respected the tank's ability to bring them through battles and get them back alive. Stories from veterans often highlight the Sherman's resilience, where even after taking hits, many tanks could be patched up and returned to service. After World War II, the Sherman didn't fade away. It served in the Korean War, where it faced off against Soviet-built T-34s. It continued in service with dozens of nations around the world for decades, from the Middle East to South America. In fact, some Shermans were still in active use into the 1970s and even later, a testament to their durability and widespread availability. The legacy of the M4 Sherman is complex. Critics focus on its vulnerabilities, pointing out the heavy losses American and Allied crews sometimes suffered against German armor. Supporters emphasize its production numbers, its reliability, and the fact that it was in the right place at the right time, giving the Allies the armored backbone they needed to achieve victory. What's clear is that the Sherman was more than just a tank. It was a war-winning tool, part of a larger system of logistics, industry, and strategy that helped the Allies prevail in World War II. Even today, the Sherman is remembered fondly by historians, collectors, and military enthusiasts. Restored Shermans can be seen in museums and reenactments, their engines still roaring to life decades after their prime. They stand as living monuments to the ingenuity of American industry and the sacrifices of the crews who fought in them. In the end, the Sherman wasn't perfect, but it didn't have to be. It was good enough, built in enough numbers, and supported by enough resources to do its job. It represents the philosophy that in war, quantity and reliability often matter as much as sheer technical superiority. The M4 Sherman proved that a tank doesn't need to be the strongest on paper to become legendary in history.